The night sky changed in an instant. People across America stopped what they were doing and looked up. Something impossible was happening above their heads. Giant ships appeared in the darkness, hanging in the sky like metal mountains. They were so big that people could see them clearly even from the ground. No one had seen them coming. They just appeared, as if someone had painted them into reality. Lisa Grant sat in her office deep underground. She was a commander at a military base that watched the skies. Her job was to protect America from threats coming from above. But nothing in her training had prepared her for this. The computer screens in front of her showed images that made no sense. 37 alien ships were floating above Earth. Each ship was bigger than any city she had ever seen. Her hands shook as she pressed buttons and checked the data again. Maybe the computers were broken. Maybe this was some kind of error. But every system showed the same thing. The ships were real. They were here. And they had weapons that could destroy everything on Earth in minutes. Kevin Barnes was a young officer who worked with Lisa. He looked at his screen and felt his heart beating fast in his chest. The numbers he was seeing were impossible. The alien ships had so much power that human technology looked like toys in comparison. One ship alone had enough energy to power every city on Earth for 1,000 years. Lisa spoke into her radio. Her voice was calm even though she felt scared inside. She asked for General Paul Henderson to come to the command center immediately. This was beyond her authority now. Someone higher up needed to make decisions about what to do next. Paul Henderson had been in the military for 30 years. He had seen wars and conflicts around the world. But when he walked into the command center and saw the images on the screens, he felt small. He felt like a child looking at something he could not understand. The alien ships were beautiful in a terrible way. They glowed with light that seemed to come from inside them. Lisa gave him the report quickly. The ships had appeared 20 minutes ago without any warning. They were not attacking yet, but their weapons were ready. They could fire at any moment. The ships were not answering any messages that humans sent to them. Radio signals, laser beams, even simple light patterns. The aliens ignored everything. Paul looked at the main screen for a long time. His mind was working through options. What could humans do against this? The answer was nothing. If the aliens wanted to destroy Earth, there was no way to stop them. The best weapons that humans had would be like throwing stones at a tank. In Washington, President Helen Carter sat in a special room under the White House. The walls had screens showing news from around the world. Every country was reporting the same thing. The alien ships were visible from everywhere on Earth. People were scared. Some were running into the streets. Others were praying. Some were just standing still, looking up at the sky in shock. The people around the president were arguing. Some wanted to attack the ships before they could attack Earth. Others said that would be suicide. The aliens were too powerful. Attacking them would only make them angry. Helen listened to everyone, but she already knew what she would do. She would wait. She would watch. And she would hope that whoever controlled those ships had mercy. In New York City, a scientist named Patricia Monroe was running through empty hallways at her university. She had been working late when the news came. Now she needed to get to her equipment. She needed to study these ships and understand what they were. Her colleague Alan Wright was already in the observation room when she arrived. He was looking at data from telescopes that were pointed at the alien fleet. Patricia stood next to him and looked at the numbers on his screen. She could not believe what she was seeing. The ships had not traveled through space the normal way. They had folded space itself and stepped through it like walking through a door. This was technology that should not exist. It broke every rule that humans knew about physics. Alan spoke without looking away from his screen. He said the ships had been detected 43 minutes ago. The energy burst when they arrived was huge. It should have torn holes in space and destroyed everything nearby. But instead, the arrival was perfectly controlled. Not a single satellite was damaged. Not even a piece of space junk was moved. The aliens had complete control over forces that humans barely understood. Back at the military base, Lisa watched as the alien ships began to move. They drifted through space without any visible engines. No fire came from them. No exhaust trails followed them. They just moved as smooth as fish swimming through water. The ships were taking up positions around Earth. They were forming a pattern, creating a cage of metal and power around the entire planet. Kevin called out suddenly. He said the ships were sending a message. It was not aimed at any specific country or person. The aliens were broadcasting on every frequency at once. Every radio, every television, every computer was receiving the same signal. Lisa told him to play it through the speakers. The room fell silent as strange sounds filled the air. It was not a language made of words. It was mathematics. Pure numbers arranged in patterns. Prime numbers came first, then geometric shapes described in equations, then physical constants that any scientist would recognize. The aliens were speaking the universal language of science. Paul understood immediately. The aliens were trying to communicate. They were showing that they understood mathematics and physics. This was a message that said they were intelligent and peaceful. At least that was what it seemed to say. Scientists around the world started working on the message. They needed to decode everything the aliens were saying. Every equation could contain important information. Every number could be a clue about what the aliens wanted. The first night passed slowly. Every minute felt like an hour. People around the world stayed awake, watching the sky, waiting for something to happen. Some people gathered their families and held them close. Others prepared to run or hide, even though there was nowhere to go. A few people felt excited instead of scared. They thought this might be a chance to learn from aliens and make friends with them, but most people were just afraid. They looked at the massive ships hanging above their homes and wondered if they would see another sunrise. The aliens had not attacked yet, but everyone knew they could. The power was in their hands now. Humanity could only wait and hope. The sun came up over the eastern coast of America, but the light seemed weak. The alien ships were still there in the sky, glowing brighter than the morning sun. 24 hours had passed since they appeared. The ships had sent their mathematical message and then stayed silent. The whole world was waiting for them to do something, to say something more, but they just floated in space watching. Patricia Monroe had not slept at all. She stood in front of a big board covered with equations and drawings. Her eyes were red and tired, but her mind was still working. Around her, other scientists from different fields worked together, trying to figure out how to answer the aliens. They had decoded the first message. It was simple. The aliens were saying hello and showing they understood science. But now humans needed to respond. Alan Wright brought her coffee and sat down next to her. He said they needed to send an answer soon. The longer they stayed quiet, the more dangerous the situation became. The aliens might think humans were too primitive to understand them. Or worse, they might think humans were being hostile by not responding. Patricia rubbed her tired eyes. She said she did not know what to say. How could humans talk to beings who were so much smarter? The aliens could probably solve complex math problems in their heads while humans needed computers just for simple calculations. It felt like trying to have a conversation with gods. Alan disagreed. He said they should be honest. They should show the aliens what humans really were. Curious, scared, but trying hard to understand. They should use the same mathematical language the aliens used. Show them that humans understood the message and wanted to talk more. Patricia thought about this and slowly nodded. Alan was right. Being honest was better than trying to pretend humans were something they were not. She started writing equations on the board, creating a message that would tell the aliens that humans received their greeting and were ready to communicate. While scientists worked on their reply, military leaders had different concerns. In a secret room under the Pentagon, General Paul Henderson stood in front of holographic images showing where all the alien ships were positioned. Every major city on Earth had at least one ship above it. The aliens had placed themselves for maximum impact. They wanted humans to know they were in control. General Susan Blake commanded the Space Force. She looked at the ship positions and said they had to assume the aliens were hostile until proven otherwise. Just because they sent a peaceful message did not mean their intentions were good. Maybe they were studying humans before attacking. Maybe they were deciding which cities to destroy first. But then someone new entered the room. Karen Hughes was the director of the CIA. She carried a tablet computer and had information that changed everything. She told them to look at the energy readings from the alien ships. Scientists had been monitoring the ships constantly since they arrived. What they found was interesting. The ships were only using 3% of their total power. 3%. They were barely turned on. Susan said maybe they did not need more power just to float in space. But Karen explained that was not the point. The ships had also been carefully moving human satellites out of their way. When space junk drifted too close to the alien ships, The aliens used small gravity fields to push it away gently. They were being careful not to damage human technology. Did that sound like an invasion force getting ready to attack? The room became very quiet. Everyone was thinking about what this meant. Then every screen in the room suddenly turned on by itself. The alien ships were broadcasting again. But this time the message was different. Images appeared on the screens, showing the aliens themselves. The aliens were not shaped like humans at all. Their bodies were made of crystal-like material that formed geometric patterns. They seemed to shift and change shape as they moved. They were beautiful but completely strange. The images showed cities made of light and matter that twisted in impossible ways. They showed ships even bigger than the ones orbiting Earth now. And then the images showed weapons. Terrible weapons that could destroy entire planets. The broadcast showed world after world, all of them ruined by war. Dead planets with cracked surfaces, stars that had been put out like candles. Whole solar systems turned into clouds of dust and debris. The crystal aliens had been fighting against something. The images showed dark shapes that moved like living shadows. These enemies looked like they corrupted everything they touched, spreading like a disease. Lisa Grant watched the broadcast from her command center. She whispered to herself that the aliens were at war. They were showing humans that they were fighting against something terrible, and then the final image appeared. It showed Earth beautiful and blue floating in space. Over this image, the broadcast showed the dark enemy approaching. The shadow things were coming here. The message was clear. The aliens were not invaders. They were giving a warning. Or maybe they were offering protection. Maybe they were going to use Earth as a battlefield against their enemy. President Helen Carter stood up in her Situation Room. She understood now. The crystal aliens had not come to conquer Earth. They had come because something worse was on its way, something that even these powerful aliens were afraid of. She said quietly that the aliens were not the threat. They were the shield. Within a few hours, the whole world knew about the broadcast. Fear changed into something different. People were still scared, but now they needed to understand more. If the aliens were here to protect Earth or to fight their war here, humans needed to know everything. How much time did they have? What were these shadow enemies? And most important, what chance did Earth have of surviving what was coming? Patricia and her team finished their mathematical reply. It was a message that said humans understood the warning. It asked for more information. It said humans wanted to help prepare for whatever was coming. The message was sent from every radio telescope on Earth at the same time. All of humanity speaking with one voice, asking the universe for answers. The alien fleet responded quickly. The ships began to change. Parts of their hulls opened up to show complex structures inside. Energy flowed between the ships, creating a web of power around the entire planet. It was beautiful and frightening at the same time. The aliens were showing what they could do. They were demonstrating their power in a way that made human technology look like stone tools. Then something unexpected happened. One alien ship broke away from the others and started coming down toward Earth. It moved slowly and carefully, giving every tracking system on the planet time to watch it. The ship was heading for the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, far away from any cities or countries. Paul Henderson watched the ship descend from his command center. He said quietly that this was it. The aliens were making real contact now, not just messages sent through space. They were coming down to meet humans face to face. The ship reached the ocean surface but did not land in the water. Instead, it hovered just above the waves, waiting there like it was expecting something. It was an invitation, a challenge. The first step toward understanding what humanity had gotten caught in the middle of. Lisa was ordered to leave her command post and join a contact team. She would be one of the first humans to actually meet the aliens in person. As she prepared to leave, she looked at the images of the ship waiting over the ocean. Her heart was beating fast. This was the moment that would change human history forever. Either humanity would make new friends today, or they would discover that the universe was more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. Maybe both things were true at the same time. The aircraft carrier moved through the Atlantic Ocean, toward the coordinates where the alien ship was waiting. The ship was called the USS George Washington, and it carried some of the most important people on Earth right now. Lisa Grant stood on the deck holding binoculars to her eyes. She was looking at the alien vessel hovering just above the water. Up close, it was even more impressive than in the satellite pictures. The hull seemed to glow from inside, and looking at certain parts of it made her eyes hurt. The geometry was wrong somehow, like the ship existed in more dimensions than human eyes could properly see. Patricia Monroe stood next to Lisa on the deck. The scientist had also been chosen for the contact team. She said the ship was waiting for them to make the next move. Lisa agreed. The question was, what move should they make? As if the aliens could hear their thoughts, part of the ship's hull became transparent like glass. Inside there was a chamber, and inside that chamber something was moving. It looked almost human. Not exactly human, but close enough to be recognizable. The figure inside raised what looked like a hand, making a gesture of greeting that anyone could understand. Alan Wright, who was also part of the team, whispered in shock. Were the aliens showing them a human shape? Why would they do that? Maybe they were trying to make contact easier by looking familiar, or maybe they wanted to show they had studied humans and knew what form would be less frightening. President Helen Carter's voice came through Lisa's radio. She was watching everything from the White House. She told Lisa that she was authorized to make contact. Take a small team. Be careful but be brave. The whole world was watching this moment. Lisa chose her team quickly. Herself, Patricia, Allen, and Kevin Barnes. Kevin had volunteered immediately when he heard about the mission. They climbed into a helicopter that took off from the carrier deck. The helicopter flew slowly toward the alien ship. As they got close, a platform extended out from the ship's side. It looked solid, even though it seemed to be made of crystalline light. The helicopter landed on the platform. The four humans stepped out carefully. The surface felt solid under their feet, but it also vibrated with energy they could feel in their bones. The transparent wall of the chamber opened and the human-shaped figure stepped forward to meet them. Close up, they could see it was not really human. The proportions were slightly off. The skin glowed faintly. The eyes were a color that did not exist naturally on Earth. But the shape was familiar enough to be less scary than the crystal aliens they had seen in the broadcast. The figure spoke in perfect English. Its voice had strange harmonics that human voices could never make, but the words were clear. It said welcome. It explained that it was a construct created to help humans and aliens communicate with each other. The humans could call it bridge. Lisa found her voice and asked the most important question. They had received the warning about the threat coming to Earth. They needed to know more. What were they facing, and why were the aliens here? Bridge made a gesture, and suddenly the four humans were surrounded by holographic images. Stars spun around them. Galaxies wheeled through space. The universe was displayed before them in all its vastness. Bridge began to explain. The enemy humanity would face was called the Devourers. They were not alive in the normal sense. They were entropy made conscious, destruction given purpose. They had destroyed 1,000 civilizations across 100 galaxies. And they were coming to Earth because the planet had something they had never encountered before. Patricia asked what that something was. Her scientific curiosity was stronger than her fear. Bridge answered with one word: potential. Humanity was young, barely out of its cradle. But humans had something unique, an ability to adapt, to be creative, to refuse to accept limitations. Even ancient races like the crystal aliens found this remarkable. The Devourers had learned to detect this potential, and they harvested it. They consumed species just when they were about to achieve greatness. Alan shook his head. That did not make sense. If humans were so special, why had no other aliens contacted Earth before? Where was everyone else in the universe? Bridge's expression became sad. It explained that most species died before they reached the stars. They destroyed themselves through war or pollution or social collapse. The crystal aliens, who Bridge called the architects, had watched species rise and fall for millions of years. They learned not to interfere because interference usually made things worse. It made species dependent and weak. Lisa pointed out that the architects were interfering now. Bridge agreed. The Devourers changed everything. When they consumed a world, they did not just destroy it. They took its potential, its possible futures, and corrupted them. Every species they harvested made them stronger and more adaptable. If they took Earth, if they took humanity's potential, they might become unstoppable. The architects decided this was the moment when watching had to end and action had to begin. Kevin, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. He said the architects were using humans as bait. They hoped the Devourers would come here so they could fight them in a place of their choosing. Bridge did not deny this. The architects were honest about their intentions. Yes, Earth was going to become a battleground, but it would have become one anyway. The Devourers were already tracking the planet. At least this way, Earth had defenders. At least this way, there was a chance. Patricia stepped forward with her tablet computer. She said they needed full disclosure. If humans were going to help, if they were going to survive, they needed to understand everything. No more mysterious warnings. Show them all the information. Bridge nodded and the holographic display exploded with data, technical information, historical records, scientific principles that would take human researchers decades to understand. It was overwhelming. A flood of knowledge that was almost too much to process. But humanity had always been good at learning quickly when survival was at stake. Lisa cut through all the data to ask the most critical question. How much time did they have? Bridge's glowing eyes seemed to dim. The Devourers would arrive in 73 hours. The architect fleet would stay in position and build defenses around Earth. But Lisa needed to understand something important. This battle would be unlike any war in human history. The Devourers did not fight only with ships and weapons. They fought with corruption. They turned worlds against themselves. They would try to make humanity destroy itself before they even arrived. Lisa said firmly that humans needed to prepare. Not just with weapons, but mentally. The whole world needed to understand what was coming and stand together against it. Bridge asked if humans could do that. Could they set aside their differences and face this threat as one species? Lisa looked at Patricia, Alan, and Kevin. She saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. The same determination that had driven humanity from caves to cities, from Earth to the moon. She answered that they were about to find out. The 4 humans returned to the carrier with more knowledge than they had ever wanted. The information Bridge had given them was being transmitted to governments and scientists around the world. Humanity now knew exactly what was coming. The Devourers were real. They were powerful, and they would be here in 3 days. The question was whether knowing the truth would help humans prepare, or would it just give them time to panic and fall apart? Bridge had warned that the Devourers would try to corrupt humanity from within, make them fight each other instead of the real enemy. As news of the threat spread around the world, that corruption would be tested. Would humanity unite against the darkness, or would fear and suspicion tear them apart before the battle even began? President Helen Carter spoke to the entire world. Her face appeared on every television, every computer screen, every phone. She spoke in English, but translators made sure everyone could understand in their own language. She told them everything. The Devourers were coming. The architects were here to help defend Earth. Humans had 73 hours to prepare. The truth was frightening, but people deserved to know what was happening. The world reacted in different ways. Some people panicked and ran into the streets. Some started riots and broke into stores. Religious groups said the end of the world was here. But most people reacted differently. They got angry. They refused to accept that some alien monsters could just come and destroy their home. Humanity looked at the cosmic threat coming toward them and said no. They would fight. In Geneva, the United Nations held an emergency meeting. Representatives from every country came together. For the first time in history, they all agreed on something. They voted to create the Unified Earth Defense Initiative. Old enemies sat next to each other and shared information without arguing. Countries that had been at war stopped fighting. The threat was too big for politics or nationalism. There was only one thing that mattered now: survival. Patricia Monroe was at the center of a huge scientific effort. The architects had given humans access to their technology database. Scientists from around the world worked day and night to understand it. It was like trying to drink water from a fire hose. Too much information coming too fast. But every piece of knowledge they could understand might save lives. Every equation they could solve might give Earth a better chance. Patricia spoke to world leaders through video conference. She explained that humans could not build the architect weapons. The materials did not exist on Earth. The physics were too complex. But humans could improve their own weapons. The architects had shown them how to make nuclear weapons more powerful using quantum mechanics. It would not make human weapons as good as architect weapons, but it would make them better than they were. The Russian leader asked how much better. His face looked tired and stressed. Patricia hesitated before answering honestly. The improved weapons might buy humanity a few extra seconds instead of being destroyed instantly. She was sorry, but she would not lie. The gap between human and alien technology was enormous. Human contribution to the battle would be small in terms of pure military power. The Chinese leader asked what humans could contribute then. If their weapons were useless, what was the point? Alan Wright answered this question. He said humans could contribute unpredictability. The architects had been fighting for millions of years. They had patterns and strategies developed over countless battles. The Devourers had learned to predict those patterns. But the Devourers had never fought humans before. Humans were chaotic and creative. They did not follow rules. They tried crazy things that should not work but sometimes did. That was humanity's advantage. Lisa Grant was back at her command center, which had been transformed into the headquarters for Earth's defense. The room was now shared with architect representatives. More bridge constructs that could help humans and aliens work together. The walls showed images of space around Earth where the architect fleet was building new defensive structures. The aliens were manipulating matter and energy to create massive weapons platforms. They were turning Earth's orbit into a fortress. Kevin Barnes watched the construction work and said he hoped it would be enough. Lisa studied the defensive array with a critical eye. She had spent 2 days learning everything she could about how the architects fought and what the Devourers could do. The picture was not good. The architects were powerful, but they were not invincible. They had lost battles before. Whole planets had fallen even with their help. Kevin asked what was different this time. Why would Earth survive when other planets had not? Lisa said the difference was humanity. Usually when the architects arrived to help a planet, the civilization was already dying. But Earth still had its cities and its people and its will to fight. The Devourers had never faced a defended species that still had all its strength. Bridget said humans were unique. It was time to prove that was true. As Earth's military forces got ready for battle, a new problem appeared. The architects had warned that the Devourers would try to corrupt humanity from within. Make them fight each other before the real enemy arrived. That corruption had already started. Social media filled with conspiracy theories. Some people said the architects were the real threat. Others claimed the whole invasion was fake, designed to create a world government. Some said rich people were planning to escape Earth and leave everyone else to die. None of it was true, but truth did not matter. People believed what they wanted to believe. In several countries, armed groups attacked government buildings. They said they were fighting against alien collaboration. This was exactly what the Devourers wanted, humanity making itself weaker before the battle even started. President Helen Carter made another speech to address this. She said she understood the fear and distrust. All through history, humans had been taught to question authority and think critically. Those instincts were good. But there was a difference between healthy skepticism and self-destructive paranoia. She told people to look at the sky, see the ships building defenses around Earth. The architects did not have to warn humans. They did not have to try to protect them. But they did. People could doubt the alien motives all they wanted, but the Devourers were coming regardless. Humanity could die divided and afraid, or they could live by standing together. She knew which choice she was making. Her words helped. The conspiracy theories did not disappear, but they lost power. People around the world began to truly unite, not because they trusted the architects completely, but because they understood survival required cooperation. Fighting each other was pointless when a greater enemy was coming. In the final hours before the Devourers arrived, something remarkable happened. People around the world stopped their normal activities and looked up at the sky. In every city, in every country, millions of humans stood together in silence. They knew what was coming. They knew the chances of survival were small. But they were going to face it standing up, not hiding in fear. Bridge stood on the deck of the aircraft carrier watching this happen through sensors that could detect human thoughts and emotions. The construct sent a report back to the architect command ship, sharing observations about human behavior. The architects responded that it was remarkable. Humans understood they might die, yet they did not run away or give up. They prepared. They fought. Maybe the architects had been wrong to only observe for so long. Maybe they should have made contact with promising species earlier. Bridge replied that maybe humanity was special, precisely because they developed without interference. What the architects were seeing now was the result of a species that learned to survive through cooperation and adaptability, without anyone guiding them from above. The architect command agreed. They said they would make sure humanity survived this battle, and perhaps learn something from humans in the process. The countdown reached its final hour. Every weapon was armed and ready. Every defensive system was active. Every human heartbeat with a mixture of terror and courage. The Devourers were almost here. Earth would soon discover if humanity's defiance was true bravery or just beautiful foolishness. But either way, they would face it together, united not by government or politics, but by the simple fact that they all called this blue planet home. And no one, not even cosmic horrors from beyond the stars, had the right to take that away without a fight. The waiting was almost over. The battle for Earth's survival was about to begin. And humanity, young and primitive as they were, stood ready to show the universe what they were made of. The Devourers arrived without warning. One moment the space beyond Earth's defensive perimeter was empty. The next moment it was filled with something wrong. The enemy fleet did not appear with flashes of light or energy. They just became present as if reality had been edited to include them. It was deeply unsettling to watch. Lisa Grant felt sick when the images appeared on her screens. The Devourer ships were organic and mechanical at the same time. They looked beautiful but also revolting, like a corpse covered in jewels. The ships seemed to shift and writhe even when they were holding still. Their hulls were covered with patterns that looked like both circuit boards and spreading disease. Just looking at them felt wrong. Her eyes tried to process something that should not exist in normal space. Kevin Barnes tried to count how many enemy ships there were, but the number kept changing. The ships were overlapping somehow, occupying the same space from different angles. The computers estimated anywhere from 50 to 500 vessels. Maybe more. It was impossible to get an accurate count. The Architect fleet responded immediately. The defensive structures they had built around Earth blazed with energy. Weapons fired that bent the laws of physics. Beams of concentrated power connected from the Architect ships to the Devourer ships instantly, not traveling through space, but just linking point to point. Missiles traveled through folded space, appearing inside enemy vessels and exploding with antimatter. The explosions should have destroyed anything, but the Devourers kept coming. For every ship that was destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. Worse, the destroyed vessels did not just explode and disappear. Their wreckage drifted toward the Architect fleet, spreading like a virus. The debris tried to attach to the Architect ships and corrupt their technology, turning it against them. Patricia Monroe watched the battle from her observation post. She and Alan Wright were monitoring everything with instruments the Architects had given them. Patricia said the Devourers were adapting in real time. They were not just a fleet of ships. They were a collective intelligence that learned and evolved during the battle. Every attack taught them how to defend against the next one. They were getting stronger as the fight went on. On the aircraft carrier, Bridge stood at a command center coordinating between human and Architect forces. The construct's form flickered as it processed huge amounts of data. Bridge announced that the Devourers were starting corruption protocols. They were beginning to attack Earth's information networks. All human computer systems needed to be isolated immediately before the enemy could take control. But Bridge had underestimated how much the Devourers had already infiltrated. Around the world, critical systems started to fail. Power grids shut down. Communication networks crashed. Nuclear power plants went into emergency mode. It was subtle at first, but the pattern became clear. The Devourers were trying to blind and cripple humanity before they even reached the planet's surface. Lisa ordered everything to be disconnected from the internet. Full isolation. Humans would go back to manual controls if necessary. As human civilization temporarily stopped using computers, the space battle grew more intense. The Architect fleet moved with impossible grace, performing maneuvers that human observers could barely follow. They fought with the precision of a species that had perfected warfare over millions of years. But the Devourers fought with something different: hunger, a need that went beyond strategy or tactics. They wanted Earth. They wanted humanity's potential, and they were willing to sacrifice any number of ships to get it. The battle raged for hours. Space around Earth lit up with energy and explosions. Some debris started falling toward the planet, burning up in the atmosphere like meteors. Then something unexpected happened. The Devourers suddenly stopped pushing forward. They began to pull back, retreating beyond the orbit of Mars. The Architect fleet held their position, uncertain. This was not a retreat. The Devourers never retreated. Something else was happening. President Helen Carter demanded to know what the enemy was doing. Bridge's form flickered with unusual intensity. The construct said the Devourers were consolidating. They were combining their ships into a single massive structure. This behavior was unprecedented. The Devourers had never done this before in any recorded battle. In space, the Devourer fleet merged together. Individual vessels lost their shape as they became part of something greater. The wrongness intensified. It looked like reality itself was tearing. A massive singular entity pulsed with malevolent intelligence. It was no longer a fleet. It was a living weapon pointed at Earth. Bridge said it was preparing to consume not just the surface of Earth but the entire planet in one action. It would drain all potential simultaneously. The Architect fleet could not stop something that large. The only way would be to sacrifice every Architect ship, detonate all their power cores at once. Even then, the chance of success was only 37%. Alan Wright was thinking fast. He suggested not trying to destroy the entity. What if they redirected it instead, sent it somewhere else? Patricia asked where they could send it that would not just doom another world. Alan said they did not need to send it to another world. They could send it to the sun. If they could redirect the Devourer entity into the sun, the gravitational forces and heat would destroy it completely. Bridge processed this suggestion. It was theoretically possible, but it would require generating a gravitational anomaly powerful enough to change the trajectory of something that massive. The Architect fleet did not have that capability alone. Alan said Earth had that capability, not through technology, through mass. If they used Earth itself as a gravitational anchor, combined with the Architect fleet's power, they could create a gravity slingshot effect. Bridge warned this was incredibly dangerous. They would be gambling with the entire planet. If the calculations were wrong by even a tiny amount, Earth could be pulled into an unstable orbit or the Devourer entity could crash into the surface. Lisa said they had no choice. Either try this or definitely die. At least this way there was a chance. The decision was made quickly. The Architects repositioned their fleet in a precise geometric pattern around Earth. They would use their ships as gravitational lenses, amplifying Earth's own mass. They would create a gravity well that would pull the Devourer entity off course and send it straight into the sun. The mathematics were incredibly complex. Thousands of variables had to be calculated and recalculated continuously. The timing had to be absolutely perfect. Humanity held its breath and prayed. The Devourer entity began its final approach, crossing Mars' orbit and entering the inner solar system. It moved with terrible purpose, warping space around it. People on Earth could see it now with their naked eyes. A dark stain against the stars that seemed to swallow light. Bridge announced they were starting the gravitational manipulation. All Architect ships went to maximum power. The alien fleet blazed with energy that made the sun look dim. Space itself began to bend around Earth. The planet was becoming a massive gravitational lens. The effect was immediate and frightening. Ocean tides rose to impossible heights. Earthquakes shook the ground. The northern lights appeared at the equator as Earth's magnetic field was stressed beyond normal limits. But it was working. The Devourer entity's path began to shift. Slowly at first, then faster. It was being pulled not toward Earth, but past it, caught in a gravitational slingshot that would send it into the sun. The entity seemed to realize what was happening. It fought against the pull, trying to change its momentum. For one terrible moment, it looked like it might succeed. Like it would crash into Earth despite everything humanity and the Architects had done. And then something remarkable happened that no one expected. The Devourer entity vanished, not destroyed, not pulled away. It simply ceased to exist in that location. One moment it was there, fighting against Earth's gravity, about to either crash into the planet or be thrown into the sun. The next moment it was gone. It disappeared as if someone had erased it from reality. There was no explosion, no flash of light, no energy signature. It was just absent. The Architect fleet fell completely silent. Every ship stopped moving. Bridge's form flickered rapidly, which seemed to indicate confusion or shock. The construct said this was impossible. The Devourers did not retreat. They never had that capability in any previous encounter. They fought until they won or were destroyed. Running away was not in their nature. Lisa Grant stared at the empty space where the massive entity had been seconds ago. She asked where it went. Bridge could not answer. Architect sensors showed no evidence of dimensional folding, no signs of hyperspace travel, no energy trail to follow. The entity had simply removed itself from this reality, departed, vanished without a trace. Around the world, humans emerged from shelters and bunkers. They looked up at a sky that was suddenly clear of the existential threat that had been about to destroy them. The architect fleet remained in defensive positions, weapons still powered up, ready for another attack. But no attack came. Hours passed with no sign of the devourers, then days. The architects maintained their guard, but with each passing hour it became clearer that the enemy was truly gone. 2 weeks after the disappearance, Patricia Monroe presented her analysis to President Helen Carter and world leaders. Based on all available data, she believed the devourer entity had made a calculated decision to withdraw. They had observed what humans were willing to do, how they were willing to risk their own planet to stop the enemy. The devourers decided humanity was not worth the cost. Alan Wright added to this analysis. He said the devourers were afraid, not of human weapons or technology, which were primitive. They were afraid of what humans represented, a species that would gamble everything on a desperate plan. That kind of unpredictability was dangerous. The devourers relied on consuming potential futures, but how could they predict beings who acted in ways that seemed irrational? Humans did not follow expected patterns. They did crazy things that should not work, but sometimes did. Bridge offered another explanation based on what the architects believed. The devourers did not retreat out of fear. They left because they realized something profound. Humanity's potential could not be consumed the normal way. Human potential was based on choice, on willingness to face impossible odds and refuse to surrender. To consume that potential, the devourers would first have to break the human will. But breaking the will would destroy the very thing they came to harvest. It was a paradox that made humans worthless to them. Lisa Grant looked up at the architect fleet still orbiting Earth. She asked what would happen now. Would the architects leave too? Bridge said that decision belonged to humanity. The architects offered to remain, to share knowledge and help Earth develop better defenses. They could teach humans advanced technology and protect them from future threats. Or the architects could leave and return to their mission across the galaxy, letting humanity chart its own course forward. The debate that followed would shape human history for generations. Some people argued for accepting architect help. With their technology, humanity could advance centuries or even millennia in just years. They could explore the galaxy, cure diseases, solve problems that seemed impossible now. Why struggle alone when friends were offering help? Others insisted humanity needed to find its own path. Depending on alien protection would make humans weak. It would erode the very qualities that had saved Earth. The unpredictability, the creativity, the stubborn refusal to accept limitations. If the architects guided human development, humans would become just another species following the ancient patterns. They would lose what made them special. Arguments happened in the United Nations, in government chambers, in homes around the world. It was a choice that affected every human alive and every human yet to be born. What kind of species did humanity want to become? One that accepted help and advanced quickly, or one that insisted on independence and struggled forward alone? Finally, a compromise was reached. The architects would remain in the solar system, but at a distance. They would take up positions beyond Neptune's orbit, far from Earth. They would monitor for any return of the devourers or other major threats. They would answer questions when asked and share knowledge when requested. But they would not guide or direct human development. They would not make decisions for humanity. Earth would stand on its own, but not completely alone. Help would be available if desperately needed, but humans would choose their own path. As the architect fleet moved to the outer solar system, humanity began the work of recovery. Cities rebuilt infrastructure that had been damaged. Scientists studied the data collected during the encounter. Engineers worked on the technology improvements the architects had shared. And ordinary people everywhere tried to process what had happened and what it meant for their future. The world had changed forever. Humans now knew with absolute certainty that they were not alone in the universe. They knew there were wonders and horrors among the stars. They knew their planet was special somehow, valuable enough that ancient civilizations would come to defend it. And they knew that humanity itself was unique, possessing qualities that even beings millions of years older found remarkable. Lisa Grant stood on the deck of the aircraft carrier one last time. The sun was setting over the Atlantic Ocean, painting the sky in colors of orange and red. Bridge stood beside her. The construct's luminescent form glowed softly in the fading light. Lisa asked what Bridge would tell the architects about humanity. Bridge answered immediately. It would tell them that humanity was exactly what the universe needed. A reminder that potential was not something to be consumed or controlled, but something to be celebrated and protected. Sometimes the youngest species spoke the wisest truths. Sometimes those who knew the least saw the most clearly. The construct paused, then added something that seemed almost like a smile. The architects had learned from this encounter. For millions of years they believed their purpose was to observe and occasionally defend, but perhaps their true purpose was to witness, to see what species like humans could become when given the chance to choose their own destiny. Bridge said, "Thank you for teaching that lesson." As Bridge transported back to the architect fleet, Lisa looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She smiled. Humanity had faced darkness and emerged transformed, not conquered but changed. The future was uncertain, full of wonders and dangers no one could predict. But for the first time in human history, that future would be written with full knowledge that humanity was not alone. Other species existed out there among the stars. Some were friendly, some were hostile, some were beyond human understanding. That knowledge, more than any weapon or technology, would shape everything that came next. The most powerful alien fleet had vanished above Earth, not destroyed in battle, but departed with new understanding. In their wake, they left a species that had looked into the abyss and chosen to be more than expected. Humanity had proven that youth did not mean weakness, that primitive did not mean worthless, that potential was most valuable when it was unpredictable and free. Children would grow up knowing the universe was vast and full of life. They would look at the stars and see not empty space, but a frontier waiting to be explored. They would learn that humanity had faced extinction and survived not through superior weapons, but through courage and creativity. That lesson would inspire generations to come. The architects watched from beyond Neptune, silent guardians keeping vigil. They had seen countless species rise and fall, but humanity was different. Humanity had surprised them. And in a universe that was billions of years old, surprise was a precious gift. Perhaps in time, humans would reach the stars and join the architects as equals, or perhaps humans would find their own path, unique and unexpected. Either way, Earth was safe. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, and the universe, vast and ancient as it was, had learned something new. Never underestimate the young. Never dismiss the seemingly weak, because sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages, and sometimes the newest species teaches the oldest truths. The night fell completely. Stars filled the sky, and humanity, young and brave and impossibly stubborn, looked up at those stars and dreamed of tomorrow.